that's on my on the photo on the thumbnail. So just got to get my picture up, and we're off. We'll get started. So I've just got to bring it up over here. There we go. And it's coming up. Come on, videos, where are you? Okay, so this little guy, he's very cute. Not exactly sure what species he is, but he is adorable. So I thought I would try and do this and do him with a little bit of a background. He looks like a little sparrowy kind of bird, but he's yellow, so I'm not 100% sure, but he's very cute, very dainty, very cute. So I've got to get his little back. I'll make adjustments as I go. So I'm going to be doing as many pictures as I can for World Watercolour Month, and I'll try and live stream them so you can watch the whole process. So I'll get his little belly like that. Oh, I can hear my dogs are trying to get in. Okay. So he's sort of facing, he's a little bit facing towards us. Goodness gracious, puppies. Alright, so he's got a grey sort of a neck. He's actually got, where's my, I'll erase this bit. Like that. Around his eye, because he's got quite a decent sized eye, and he's got a patch around his eye. And his beak comes back like that. And he's got his darker bit. So it comes back there, down and around, and to there. Then we'll pop his wing feathers. He's got both of his wings sort of overlap a little bit there. So he's got his top of his feathers there, and then he's got all these overlapping ones. And they start with the longest and then get smaller. Every step of the way gets a little bit smaller. So draw the lines down. Like that. Not quite sure how many feathers there are, I haven't counted them. Like that. And then these ones sort of go up like that. And same on the other side, they sort of meet in the middle at the back. A little bit of back in the middle. Then rough those down. Righto. I think I've got to make him a little bit more plump than I've got him. Like that. And I'll do his little leg. Comes down here. And around his little stick. I can only see two little toes on the front. And same with this one. And I got my picture from Unsplash, which is a royalty-free website. So you can use the photographs for your references. It's not a problem. So I'll draw his little branch coming down here. Like that. I'm not going to do all of the background. I'll just do a couple of sections of it, just for interest's sake. And then there's sort of a branch along. I won't worry about that one. Actually, I'm just going to do the branch he's sitting on. Then I'm going to draw his tail in. So his tail sort of comes around like that. And he's got his middle feather. He's very sparrow-like. I'm not sure what he is though. But he's very dainty and he's very cute. So he goes with the prompt perfectly. So I'm just looking at the reference and getting a general idea. I'm not counting the feathers exactly. Oops. There we go. So I'm drawing little claw in there. All right. So I might not even worry about that. I'm just going to do him like that. Got to do another little one there, I reckon. Got a little tail feather. Erase that little bit there. So you can adjust, readjust and change things as you need to. Like that. Okay, let's get into the adding colour. So I'll go around the background first. So I should grab a bit of cloth and clean my palette. Give it a wipe just with a bit of kitchen cloth. I use porcelain palettes, so nice and easy to keep clean. Nice and easy to keep clean. Alrighty. Grab my brush, bit of cloth in my hand. Alright. I'm going to grab a middle sized brush. I'm going to spray my watercolours, keep them nice and moist. And we'll do the background first, I reckon. And I'll go in with a bit of green. Bit of a dark green, I reckon. That's a beautiful green. It's called, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's olive green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the background around the bird. Just wet all of that cutting around him. Oh, got a bit of colour in my brush, but it doesn't matter. Alright, so I'm just wetting the paper just around the bird. Try to stay off the bird because I don't want the paint to run into his feathers and stuff. So I come around there like that. I can keep an eye on where it's been put. Okay, so I've wet all of that and I'm going to drop my green on around him and let it run. Give him a nice green background. And cut right, I can take it right up to his feathers because I've cut around him with the water. It shouldn't run anywhere else except the wet areas, I hope. Okay, I'll just do that. Take that down a bit further that way, cut right into his little body there. Get up that excess wood paint there, move that around a little bit. It'll dry fractionally paler. I'm just going to let it run. I'll drop some different yellows in there as well, just for a bit of interest while it's still wet. So I'll just take it and go around this little guy here. And I'll have to let that settle for a minute or two. so I'm just going to do that. Just cut, and I'm just going to leave it loose like that, just so it's very soft. And delicate looking. Rightio, might zoom in a little bit for you. Can I zoom in a little bit? There we go. Oops, no, wrong way. That way. There we go. So you can see a bit more what I'm doing. All right. So I'll let that dry, and I'm going to go straight into his little eye. And his little eye is dark grey. So I'm going to go with a bit of burnt umber, a bit of cobalt blue. Just makes a brownie grey. And I'm just going to go keep my hand off the wet paint. Leave a little tiny white bit for the highlight, which is the white of the paper. If I lose any white, it doesn't matter. I can use a bit of white pen. But I'm trying to leave the little highlight as the white of the paper. So that's just got his eye right in there, nice and easy. Whoops, there we go. And I'll even dab a little bit of blue into the centre of that, just to give it a bit more interest, a bit more colour. Drop a little bit of blue. You won't even notice it, but I notice it. And if the light hits it, you'll be able to see that. So that's that. And I've got to stay away from the edges until the edges are dry. So, because that water where I put the green on is still quite wet. So I'm going to mix up, because he's quite orange. I'm going to mix up an orangey colour. Mix up a nice little orange. And add a bit more yellow to it. So yellow and red makes orange. So add a bit more yellow to that. And then I can work around the areas that don't have water near them. So I can work around this part of his little wing while the rest of it's drying. And I can add, it's got a little bit of brown to it too, so I might add a little bit of yellow ochre in a minute, but I'll just start working on this area first. Start to get some of the colours into his wings. Come around that edge like that. It's a very vibrant colour for now, but and I can do just the middle part of his tail. I'll stay away from the edges just at the second. I've mixed up enough of this paint that I can dip back into it when I need to. I'll go under here, just again staying away from the very edge. And the top of his face is grey. So I'm going to get it watered down, slightly diluted. Come down onto his little belly. Run down and around. Like that. Okay. So I'll make up a grey now for his head. So I go burnt umber cobalt blue again, but very diluted this time. Very diluted. For a very pale grey. Actually, I might add a bit more blue to that because it's a bluey grey. Tiny little bit more blue and a lot of water. Keep it very diluted. So now I add that onto his little head and neck. So I dilute it some more. Come down and around, and that'll dry back quite pale. Just staying off that edge a little bit. I just cleaned my brush and I'm just going to pull that grey around that I've already put on there. It's very, very pale, and just staying away from that white part around his eye because I want that to stay white. He's got a little touch of brown on the top of his head, which I'll add in a minute. And he's also got that brown onto his wings. Okay. So now I've actually got, I'm going to see, while that's still wet, I can I've got to soften that edge around his beak. I didn't quite get the paint up to his beak. So I'm going to see if I can just rub it and soften that a little bit. There we go. Okay, now for his wings, it's a little bit of brown. But for the brown that I'm going to use, because it's a very pale browny grey, so I'm just going to add a bit of transparent sienna. It's a reddy brown. Actually, that's a beautiful colour, the transparent sienna, but I might add a touch of another brown just to bring it down a fraction. So I've added a touch of burnt umber. I've got transparent sienna and a touch of burnt umber. And I'm going to just start to move that around the edges of these wings, feathers, leaving little gaps between, like that. So I'm not filling it in solidly. I'll leave little touches of light in between, so that, because there's tiny little bits of white edges on the feathers. Ooh, trying not to wobble. I get the wobbles up. I've got the wobbles. So, and I can go over this with a wash in a minute when it's dry, once I've got all the feathers sort of marked in. Alright. Now his feathers sort of overlap. Well, they meet on his back. I've got to actually elongate these ones a fraction. I haven't quite got them long enough there, so I'll just extend them from my pencil mark. And then coming up his back, they get slightly shorter as we go. So you can see I'm not exactly sticking to my drawing, I'm altering them a tiny little bit. That one there actually is a fuller feather. It goes like that. Having a quick look at the big screen. Okay, now I continue that on down the other side. Okay. And I'll build this up over a few layers as I go. So I'm just doing the first layers now. I've just got to be careful to leave, I'm just going to tip the ends with this brown. And then it sort of continues down the length of his tail, but being careful to leave some of that yellow showing through. Like that. And actually this brown, these feathers are a little bit thicker, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to get a little bit of yellow ochre. Where's my yellow ochre? There's my yellow ochre. I'm going to clean my palette. Move my table a bit closer, because my table's far, far, far away. So I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow ochre and I'm going to bring that onto his little belly. So I'm having a look. So he's a little bit darker under here. And I'll build this up over, because I'll build this up over a few layers, but they've got natural colours in them because they sort of blend into their little surroundings. So pop that on there, onto his little belly. And I'll add some shadows as well. Come down here. Like that. He's got a little white bottom, little brown legs. Got a little burnt umber on his legs. Just diluted. Actually, I should do the stick, shouldn't I? Is the paper wet? Paper's dry. Okay. So to do the branch, all I'm going to do is clean my brush. While I'm letting the bird dry a little bit, I can do the branch because the background's dry. So I literally go over the branch just with a wet brush, like that. Rinse it, clean it. I'll go in with my yellow ochre and I will drop the yellow ochre onto the branch, like that. Let it run around. It's not really running, but that doesn't matter. I'll just add a bit of water to that. Should have got it a bit wetter, but it doesn't matter. So a bit of water to that. Then I'm going to add some burnt umber onto the top of that as well. I'm just going to re-wet it a little bit. There we go. Add a bit of burnt umber on top of that. So I'm using all the same colours in the bird, in the background. I'll add a bit of purple in the shadow areas. I'll just add this brown burnt umber, just adding odd textures. So it'll dry and it'll look like wood. So you just really wet your paper just where you want the paint to be. Got to lift up that beady bit at the bottom. And you can drop in a few different wood colours, like burnt umber like I'm doing here, into the wet paper. Just sort of use the tip of your brush to move it around and it'll give you a wood texture like that. And underneath the wood is darker, so I'm going to mix up a purple. So into that brownie mix, I'm going to go a bit of blue, a bit of red, make up a purple. So a bit of blue, bit of red, a bit more blue, make it real purple. And then go under the log in the shadow area while it's still damp. Take that underneath the log because that's all in shadow. And because the paper's wet, the paint will run up into the paint, into the water you've already got on the paper, like that. And then just directly underneath the bird, I'll make a slightly darker shadow colour for the very bottom as well. I might add a bit of grey to that, but directly under the bird, I'll make it a little bit darker. And then I'll add a bit of grey to that mix, a little bit of grey, just at the bottom of the stick with the birds perched on. And I'm not worrying about it being a perfect line because it'll absorb up the water that's on the paper. I don't mind it being a bit jaggedy, like that. Here we go. I might make it a little bit darker just directly under the bird. So that's burnt umber, cobalt blue, little bit of yellow ochre, and that's my stick just about sorted. I'll just add a little bit of wood texture, which is just bajaggedy lines, bajaggedy lines, like that. Right, now I'll leave that alone. Get back onto my little bird, get some detail happening in his little cuteness. So clean my brush, give it a good old rinse around, good old swoosh in the water, give it a swooshity whoosh. Now his little beak, his beak's grey, so I can actually use a little bit of the same grey. I can hear my daughter playing with the dogs in the lounge room, having an absolute ball of a time. Just laughing and rolling around playing with the dogs. Alright, now, and I'm going to use a little tiny bit of that grey on his beak also, above his beak here. Might add a little bit more brown to it. Just pop that. Whoops. Clean my brush, get a bit of, now I've got a cloth in my hand and I sort of sop out the excess moisture. And I can start to build up the top layers now, make him look a bit three-dimensional, which is what we want. We want him to look a bit more alive, a bit less flat looking. So he's got a little bit of brown on the feathers on his head, so I'll pop just little marks of brown in. Once the background's all completely dry, which it is, I'm just going to clean my brush, take the excess moisture out of it, and just move the edges of that little bit of brown that I've just put on. Make up a bit more of a blue. Got to clean my palette again because my palette's only got 5. It's a porcelain palette, and it's only got 5 little spaces on it. So I sort of, unless I mix up the same colours, I've got to clean off a spot. So I'm just going to add a bit of this blue because there's a very blue grey into these feathery bits on the top of his head. Just using the very tip of the brush. Very tip in the darker areas. Alright, and then coming around here. Because I don't want him to look, I want him to look like he's got feathers and have little bajiggity bits. So come round here. And this will dry back quite pale. And I'll do a darker orange for the shadow areas on his little chest. So I'm just doing little feathery textures, so just tiny little brush strokes using the tip of my brush. Going the direction of the feathers, they sort of come down this way. Might add a bit of darker green in his background as well, just around his back, I think. We'll see how we go. You can sort of go with the feel, and if you want to add more, you can. I'm going to go a darker shadow on his nose, on above his beak. It's not his nose. I could give him a human nose, that'd be funny. All right, come down here. Okay, now I'm going to make a darker shadowy colour. Bit of blue, but maybe a bit of indigo. That's a beautiful colour. I'm going to pop that around the top of his nose. Beak. Oh my god. Top of his beak. It's not a nose. Well, it's still a little bit damp too. It'll flow around, which is nice. And I'm going to do the very top of his beak. Dark. That's almost dry. It's not perfectly straight, so I'm going to do a little dark bit here and then a little bit there, like that. Alright, that pops a little bit of detail in there. Now I'm going to also take that just around this part of his eye, just underneath. So he starts to look a little bit less flat now, and where his ear is, he's got a little ear bit there. It's a little bit darker. So anywhere that I can see, it's a little bit darker on this blue spot, blue area. I'm using this just indigo, very diluted indigo, like that. Okay, cool. Now, I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to add a couple of different blues. I'm going to go back into my cobalt. Dilute that down, clean my brush, take the excess moisture out, then work back over this top bit with the cobalt blue, like that. Alright, that's looking okay. Righto. So now I'm going to go into his belly. So I'm going to make orange, dark orange, but I want to add a little bit of brown to it. How am I going to do that? Oh, actually, you know what I need? It does need to be a purpley orange. Oh, I need to make it a greyish. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We're going to fiddle with a bit of colour. So I'm going to add a bit of blue to the orange. Oh yeah, that works. That makes it a muddy orange colour, which is sort of what I want because it's a shadowy colour on his belly. It's an orangey brown. That works. So that's red, yellow, and a bit of blue. I'll soften that up a little bit. I've got that a bit too strong. I'll add a bit of water. So I clean my brush, take the excess moisture out, and then just drag that around with a damp brush. You can see that lightened that off a little bit, which is what I wanted. And then down his chest the same. Take a little bit down here. So he's at his brightest on the side of him where the sun sort of hits him. Got dark under there. Righto. I'll just soften these little edges up. So I just clean my brush, take the excess moisture off and rub around the edges. And that softens that up for me. I haven't done his little leggies yet, but I better do those. But I'm going to actually bring this browny orange that I just made. So red and yellow makes orange. I'm going to add a bit of blue to it, just to brown it off, grey it off. There we go, makes a muddy sort of grey. And I'm going to bring that, the orangey grey, into his wings. And it's just started to rain out there. So I'm just going to draw little tiny feathery textury marks coming up onto his wing, like that. And same here. Take that all the way along. And then this feather, it's a bit lower down. And I'll just darken that up. I'll add some stronger browns in a minute. Come down here. He's actually got a tiny little bit darker under here, so I can use that same colour in the darkest shadow area. So it's basically the same colour, it's just less diluted. I'll just clean my brush, take the excess moisture off and drag out the edges. Right, now I've got to mix up a grey for his little legs. So, blue and brown. I'll use indigo blue, bit of burnt umber, makes a natural grey. Indigo, and I'm using my Sennelier and my Schminkies. They're my favourites. I always have both palettes out at once for my Sennelier and my Schminky paints. And I'm going to add that onto his little legs. I'm going to leave little snips of white of the paper. It's actually almost in pure shadow. I've got to go a little bit of that blue, just a tiny little bit of that pale blue around the edge of his eye too. So I'm going to, while that's very gently, a little touch of that blue around his eye, like that. Right, I'll go a bit of stronger orange, a bit more of a pure orange here. Under there. Coming onto here, it'll fade back. Won't be quite so vibrant as I've got it now. I'll just add that a little bit down there and I'll drag it out, clean my brush. And just soften those edges with that orange, and it just adds a bit of warmth and it adds a little bit of three-dimensional look to him, bit of depth. I'm learning to be a bit braver with colours. Go a bit stronger with the colours. I'm going to add a little bit of that onto his tail also. Like that. Alright, let's have a look. I'm going to add a little bit of white. I've got my white pen here. I'm going to add a little dab of white. Back, I'm going to just strengthen up that white in his eye. Just a little bit. That's better. Alright. Now, I've got to take that yellowy orange, that colour, into his wings. Into this light part of his wings. Like that. And then down his back where I've missed it. Alright, he's looking cute. Okay, I'm going to go stronger brown now. Now a bit of pure burnt umber, I think. Yeah, I reckon a bit of pure burnt umber. Make it quite thick. Actually, I'll add a bit of blue to it. Add a touch of blue. There. And I can darken up this bit. That, then coming down the length of the feather, very gently using the tip of the brush, like that. It comes down here, whoops. And then his darkest there. Like that. And then I've got to darken up this part of his feathers. Back of the feather just there. Like that. Righto. Same on the other side now. Not as much, but just to suggest that that's there. Like that. Now the middle feather on his tail is quite dark. Then the one next to it has got the shadow along it, both sides, like that. Okay, I'm going to add quite a strong shadow colour now to the top of the underside of that leg, the top underneath his body, but to the top of the leg I mean. There, right there, dark, it's darkest dark, there and there. And he's actually quite dark on the bottom side of his beak, like that. I want to try and brighten up just a little bit around his eye. So I'm just going to use my white pen just to get that white paper back. There we go. Just a little bit. And I'll use a little bit there. Actually, I've got gouache. I'll use gouache. And I'll go tiny little bit of grey. Just ever so little bit to the tips of these feathers. Just onto the tips. Tiniest little blob of grey. Like that. And I'll run that down the shadow area on this tail feather. Oop, that didn't work, did it? Get a bit more grey on the tip of my brush. There we go. Just take that down the teeniest little bit. Alright, tiny little bit of grey on the top of his beak, like that. Run it to the end, then a little bit here, like that. Okay, the tiniest little bit onto the feathers on his chin, like that. And I'll just dilute that down a little bit, so add a touch of water to it and come under here into that shadow just here. I'll mix up a little bit of purple, bit of blue, bit of red. I'll use a bit of indigo, bit of cad red, bit of indigo, bit of cad red. Make up a purple for a shadow, a bit more blue, ready to be purple-area. And I'm going to add that under here, in his shadow area under his belly, like that. And then drag it up with a damp brush, clean my brush, damp it off, take the excess moisture off, and then drag out the edges like that. Same around the back of his little bot, because that's in shadow, like that. And he's got a bit of shadow around here. Dilute it right down. Like that. I'm going to add a bit more yellow to here. Bit of a pure strong pigment. It's like a cad yellow, this one, cadmium yellow. I'll add that into here. Like that. Righto. And add a touch of that onto his tail as well. And a touch onto his back. Having a quick look at the picture. I'm going to add a little bit, I've got a little bit of gouache here that I have for when I've lost the white. I've got to just wet that. Because gouache is like an opaque water medium, very similar to watercolour, just I've just got to add a bit that I've lost here back in. Just a few little touches of light around the edge of his feathers and a little bit onto his bot there and a bit down the edge here. And a tiny, teeny touch onto the top of his beak. And then I reckon we are just about done. So that's a fun little sketch for today's prompt, which was Dainty for day 3 of World Watercolour Month. So I am going to sign him off. Get a bit of grey, or a bit of blue even, we'll go a bit of blue down here. I'm going to sign it and call that done. Now I'm going to try and do a small prompt for each day of Watercolour Month this year. So I'll do it live, I'll try and live stream it, so if you'd like to come and hang out, that'd be awesome. I'll have the details for my other social medias linked below. Thank you so much for hanging out, guys and girls, and I will see you all for the next video. Have an awesome day. Okie doke, catch you then.